I'm Sam, and this is Baby Ready. And today we're talking about keeping your baby safe. We'll be talking about some of the things that you can do for your brand new infant and keeping them safe in those first few weeks when you bring them home. And then we're going to be talking about life with your baby as your baby continues to grow and learn to move on their own. It's about keeping them safe all of the time. And I've written blog posts about things like this in the past, but it's really important to me that some of this information be accessible to those of you who are subscribing to my channel, because these are questions that aren't always answered. And sometimes we hear bits and pieces of things, but we don't necessarily always hear the reasons behind some of it. So today I want to talk about things like car seat safety and sleep safety for sure. And I'm just touching on sleep safety. I am actually going to do a full episode about creating a safe sleep environment for your baby. And I have already touched on this in a similar way to the way I'm going to manage it today when I talked about the 10 things you need to have when you have a new baby. You need to have somewhere for your baby to sleep, absolutely, unequivocally, and that needs to be safe. So when we're talking about sleep safety in its basic form when you have a new baby, then what I want you to keep in mind is that babies should be dressed only to sleep. They don't need blankets and pillows and things like that to keep them warm. We want to put them in an undershirt, a sleeper, make sure their feet are covered, and let them sleep. If your house is kept particularly cool, you may then also want to try and employ a sleep sack, which looks a little bit like an undershirt that comes down below their feet and sews together so that they're fully enclosed in that. And some of them have openings at the bottom of that sack so that it makes changing diapers for newborns easier. Those all work. But do try to keep in mind that we don't put anything in baby sleep environment when they're really little. We don't want anything in baby sleep environment because we don't want to increase the risk of suffocation or propulsion tool to help them get out of the crib. And I recognize that you look at your little baby and you think, how is this person ever going to be able to push all their stuff into the corner and get themselves out? But it happens surprisingly early, and they don't do it to be evil little children and to scare the crap out of you. That just happens to happen, that you become frightened by their dexterity and their abilities faster than you anticipate. But we want them just on a firm, fitted mattress in their crib or their bassinet or wherever they're sleeping, surrounded by nothing but space so that they can sleep safely. Always on their back. That helps them to keep their airways open and keeps the air around them flowing freely. I often talk to parents who say, well, my baby prefers to sleep on their tummy. And I understand that. That gives them that comfort of that pressure. It feels like they're laying against you. The challenge with that is, especially because newborn babies tend to put their hands up around their head, that air becomes stagnant or can become stagnant and then can create an environment where baby's not getting enough fresh, clean oxygen while they're sleeping. And that's why we don't want them sleeping on their tummies. Your baby won't spit up and choke on whatever they've spat up. That's not something that is human nature. It happens when people are incapacitated with drugs or alcohol, or they have a physiologic disability that prevents them from being able to turn their head, move their tongue, and thrust whatever is in their mouth back out again. But babies don't have that disconnect within their bodies. And so to protect themselves, their body will spit it back out by using the tongue thrust. When we're talking about car seat safety, we want babies to be in their seats, as I said before, with one finger on each shoulder under the strap, but not two. Straps are laid flat across the chest, armpit clip is done up at the armpits, and then the straps come up and lay flat across their hips and between their legs. Nothing behind the baby, so no bundle me bags or snowsuits. You may want to look at getting something like a little poncho to go over your baby's head and cover their body while they're in the car. And then when you take them out of the car seat, you lift them up and that poncho covers their body to keep them warm in the cooler months. Now let's talk a little bit about once your baby becomes a bit more mobile. Very few of us get on our hands and knees and crawl around the house to see how clean it is. Quite frankly, if we're standing up and we're looking down and things look okay, we're happy with that. but we want to look at the world from baby's perspective. So get down on your hands and knees and have a look around and see what your baby could find. Are there frozen peas that are no longer frozen but have really dehydrated and become quite hard and therefore a choke hazard underneath the fridge or the stove? Are there little bits of food somewhere that you didn't see because it's not in the line of vision? And I'm not saying that you're not clean housekeepers. That's not my intention at all. But sometimes things get overlooked that we didn't even consider. Think about your potted plants that are sitting on the floor. You've got a beautiful Benjamina in the living room, and you've got decorative stone across the top of it, around the top of the pot, over top of the soil to just help make it look nice and give some decoration. Those stones become choke hazards. And truthfully, any of the potted plants on the floor contain soil that you've been putting water into and keeping at room temperature and moist for a prolonged period of time. So the bacterial growth in that soil alone is not particularly healthy for babies to consume. So consider lifting those kinds of things up off the floor just until babies can be moving around and know not to try and get into it. Look under the coffee table. How hard are the edges on the coffee table? Do you want to slide it to the side so that baby has more space to get around? The bookshelves you have in your house that maybe aren't as full of books these days as they used to be because more of us are reading things online and watching things online than we are picking up physical books. Those units can become top heavy. Same with television stands and things like that. So make sure they're secure to the wall. Dressers too. I do have some people that tell me that they go through the bathroom and they seal everything off, make sure it's all safe. And others just talk about putting a hook and eye on the door so that when the door's closed because the bathroom's not being used, then they can just hook it closed and keep baby out. But then when they have to go to the washroom, they don't have to struggle with the latch on the toilet seat or anything else. It's really, truly up to you. But think about what kinds of things could be potential dangers to your baby and just get about clearing them out the way before you have to worry about it. Look between the cushions on the sofa and that kind of thing as well. It may be worthwhile to have your partner lift the sofa and one of you vacuum underneath, that kind of thing, before baby gets too mobile. And do it sooner rather than later, because you're going to be amazed at how fast your child is able to get about on their own. When we're talking about things like toys and stuff like that, I used to use a toilet paper tube as a guide for my children. If I could put a toy or a part of a toy inside a toilet paper tube and I couldn't see the toy at the top or the bottom, but yet it fit within the tube, then I knew that that toy was too small for a child under the age of 3. Made it easy to separate the toys and keep things categorized, because everyone was giving me gifts and I wanted to make sure that I was keeping things age appropriate for my children. I made a habit as well when I was in the kitchen to always turn the handles towards the back, and for the stoves that have knobs on the front, take the knobs right off when I wasn't using the stove. I made sure that there was a cupboard that was accessible to baby that had all kinds of non-breakable things in it. Tupperware, pots and pans, the dishes like serving spoons and things like that, so that they felt like they were participating in the kitchen when I had to be in there, but that I knew that they could be safe if I wasn't watching them 150%, because perhaps I was standing at the counter preparing dinner while they were playing on the floor beside me. I talked about making sure you have a first aid kit that you have accessible and you've checked expiration dates on, so that you know you have it and it's ready when you need it. Don't forget you need a thermometer and infant acetaminophen in case your child under the age of 3 develops a fever over 98 degrees. It needs to be treated right away to avoid febrile seizures, and take them to an emergency room physician. You may be looking at going back to work once your parental leave is finished. And if so, you may be looking at placing your child into a childcare setting outside of your home. I can't tell you whether or not daycare centers are better than home care centers. What I can tell you is that a friend of mine many years ago mentioned to me that it is always advantageous to try to find childcare closer to home than closer to work. Closer to home means that if something comes up and you can't get there to get your child, you can put another name on the list outside of the two of you to have come and pick your child up from care and look after them and keep them close to home. closer to work ties you to work and working in that environment, especially here where I live right now, where many of the people who live in my community work almost an hour outside of my community. So now looking for future employment would tie them to a community much further away if their childcare was over in that area. So little things like that go a long way. When my kids were little, I used to go to the Ontario Early Years Center with them. And this is a place where they have library rooms where you can sit with your young child and read books. They usually have an infant care room. They have a gross motor development room, usually a small gymnasium type of setup with slides and cars and bouncy balls and things like that that kids can freely throw and play with. And many people that I met liked to use these facilities because they were indoors, so in inclement weather they had access to them, but also so that they didn't have to have all of these big toys at home, especially if they didn't have the space for them. But one of the things that I observed when I was there was that many local home care providers would take their charges to the Early Years Center so that the kids could all play amongst themselves. And that also gave the care provider an opportunity to visit with other adults while the children played. They would bring snacks with them and they would monitor the children. It gave me a chance to observe how each care provider cared for the children in their charge, as well as what kind of snacks they provided. How quick were they to respond when a child had an issue? Those kinds of things. These are the types of answers that you want to have. However, if you're being interviewed, just as you anticipate if you're interviewing someone else, you're going to get the answers that you think want to be heard. And you don't necessarily give a full picture. Or you may see yourself through rose-colored glasses. I think I like to do this, but in reality I don't. So I don't mean any disrespect to anyone doing child minding, because I'm going to tell you right now, it is an extremely difficult job. And it's not one that I've ever had for any length of time. So I can't speak to how emotionally and physically demanding it can be, although I can anticipate how emotionally and physically demanding it must be, having had my own children that I was caring for. You want to make sure that you and anyone caring for your child is both infant and child first aid CPR certified. Take a course. If you're still pregnant, now's the best time to do it. And if you've done it before and think, well, I've got that certification, I encourage you to try it again. Because if this is your first child and you certified before you found out you were going to become a parent, then the way that you perceived and received the information being presented was very different psychologically and emotionally than it will be when you look at that content and think, this could be my child. But you always want to make sure that you have all of the information you need to keep your babies as safe as possible. There really isn't a lot that your babies need. I've had people over the years ask me if they need to baby-proof their entire home, and honestly, no, you don't have to. It's truly 150% up to you. One of the things that I will encourage you to keep in mind, however, is that it can be more relaxing for you and more comfortable and fluid for you if you feel as though there are spaces within your home that have been completely child-proofed, so that you can set your baby down and leave them for a moment in a safe space where you don't perceive that they're going to be able to get hurt. And you can go to the washroom by yourself for 5 minutes, or you can grab yourself a glass of water or a snack or something, that you don't have to feel like you have to have eyes on your child 150% of the time. You're always going to be listening for them. You're always going to be wondering what they're up to if they're not in your line of sight. But to be able to come home, especially if you've been out, let's say you go out, you go visiting somebody someday when pandemic is all finished and we're allowed to go visit people again. But let's say you go visit someone and you're in their home and their home's not baby-proofed. And then while you're there, you're constantly watching your moving child get from place to place to place, and you're worried about whether or not they're going to break something, get into something they shouldn't have access to something that would frighten them, all of these kinds of things. It can be such a relief when you get home to be able to sit down with your baby, put them down in a space that's completely baby-proofed, and just breathe. When your child gets old enough to be able to sleep in a bed versus a crib, which I'm going to actually categorically say isn't a time frame. Babies can go right into a mattress on the floor or a bed right from birth. They never need to use a crib. But our society dictates that cribs are where babies sleep in North America. And so if that's the route you're choosing to go, and I assume most of you will be, then when your child is no longer needing to be in a crib, or you're feeling as though it may be safer to have them in a bed, then you can start with the mattress on the floor. That way, if baby falls out, then they're only falling a few inches or so, but they're not falling a great distance and they're not going to hurt themselves. That does mean, however, that you're going to want to baby-proof that room so that when the child falls out and wakes up and they get about, then they are safe in their space, especially if you aren't in the same space with them and can't get to them immediately. These are just some of the things that I encourage you to have an awareness about. There is a website, guidetolesstoxicproducts.com, and they have a series of links to different products that you may choose to use for your baby that may be more environmentally responsible and safe for your baby's body. Read labels, be aware, be conscious. I know you want the best for your baby, and sometimes you don't even realize what you don't know because nobody's talked to you about it before. It's not ignorance on your part, or certainly not willful ignorance. You just haven't ever heard of it before, so you don't necessarily know where to start, and that's why I'm here. If you've got questions about things, if you're wondering whether or not a product is safe, if you've read a label and you're not quite understanding what it means, if anything comes up, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Feel free to email me at babyreadylgbtq@gmail.com. Leave a comment on the Contact Us page on my website, www.babyready.info, or leave a comment here in the comment section on this YouTube channel. I hope you have a wonderful day. Spring's just around the corner. Can't wait for it to warm up a little bit, soaking up the sunshine, and I hope that you're savoring every moment of your pregnancy and your child-rearing years. Take care.